something I want to highlight, like asking that better question, right? To get a better, hopefully, answer, right? And it's not easy to do, right? And so coming from that perspective, I really admired hearing, your creative approach, right? Like with the Gold Corp challenge and, trying something that hadn't been done before, right? And it's crazy the impact or the result that we could get when we come off with different biases, right? And approach with different angles. So I really value that about you. That's one reason why I want to bring you on, Rob. But something that I want to stay on here is, you talked about Gold Corp. That must have been really exciting when you guys had the goods in the ground. And I don't even know what that feeling was like. But when the company grew from a market cap of 15 million to 8 billion, that's just wow, like congrats. A question I have for you is, what exactly is a mining entrepreneur, and how could someone become a world-class mining entrepreneur like yourself or Pierre Lassonde or Frank Giestra? How does someone do that?
That's a really good question. I've never tried to go back in there. In case of Pierre Lassonde and Seymour Schulich building Franco-Nevada, they took a concept that was in the oil and gas industry, royalties, sort of basically taking a piece of the top line or your revenue and building a company based on that. They had a property in Nevada, which they sold to Barrick, and the Gold Strike property, and they sold it to a maverick, Peter Monk, and Monk was ambitious and hungry to build. And I'd say Franco-Nevada, its early days were built on top of Monk's ambition. And Monk bought a property that the rest of the mining industry didn't want to touch. It was in Nevada. It was between two of the largest American gold mining companies. They were mining what's called open pit, like digging a hole from surface and going down, rather than underground mine. And he paid $60 million, and everybody thought that was an outrageous price to pay for it. This didn't have any resources or gold that could be processed by the open pit methods that were used, or treatment. But there was some gold down below that was quite rich, but it was chemically complex. So they left it. Well, this little thing he bought for 60 million has produced over 40 million ounces of gold. And Monk went on building, and the revenue as Monk, I remember the first time he said, we're going to produce 100,000 ounces a year. And then the next year he'd be at an investor conference with a physical model of the mine. And he said, now we're going to do 200,000 ounces. And then a year or two later, we've just expanded it again to 400. And eventually they're producing 1 million ounces of gold a year. And Franco-Nevada is taking 1 or 2% of the revenue right off the top. And so they built a company that, I remember Pierre telling me, each of their employees was, if you divided the number of employees into their revenue, was generating $3-4 million a year. They had a very small staff. They didn't have to worry about HR or unions or environmental or government or any. It's just right off the top. And they perfected that model and went around buying. They'd raise money. They'd wait for the market to go down. And they'd come in and say to a mining company, hey, this is a byproduct. You have gold. You might be producing copper, but we'll buy the gold portion of it. And the beauty of their model was their revenue model their piece of the revenue sat there for the entire life of that mine. And most mining projects, when you start it, the estimate of the life is far shorter than what it actually becomes. I mean, you go to Val d'Or or you go to Timmins, their mines have been going there for 100 years. but no one ever thought they'd go that long. I think in the case of Frank Giustra, he was in the brokerage industry first. He financed a lot of mining companies. He's in Vancouver, where there are all sorts of junior startups, and they can have quite explosive growth. Murray Pesum was a fellow promoter that inspired me in some ways, because he'd keep coming in with ideas, and many of them just kept going. They kept growing. He identified large deposits. So yeah, there's people like that. Or you look at Robert Friedland, who Voisey's Bay sold for over 4 billion. He took home 650 million himself. He's got a rich copper mine in the Congo now, and he's got one over in Mongolia. They're pushing the boundaries. I think of Robert, he sort of fly into a country that no one wants to go to, and it's like, take me to your president when he lands. I want to talk about a deal. The Lundin family, same thing, moving into places no one thought it was safe to go into, cutting deals and finding opportunity. So it's often looking where most people have concluded there's no value, and looking a little harder and deeper, and maybe imagining. You look at the environment. I can think of Red Lake, where our mine was, and there was a gold rush in then the 20s. There was a gold rush right after the Second World War. The third gold rush was started by our discovery at Red Lake back in when we had the Gold Corp Challenge. And then more recently, there's a company called Great Bear that I bought an interest in, and it's the fourth gold rush up there. And I said to our former geologist, I said, this discovery was 15 miles away from our property. How come no one figured that one out until now? And some of the big mining companies have been in there earlier, and they just looked at it differently. So in mining, a lot is thought, if you look in the shadow of the head framer, which is the elevator that takes you underground, often there are times it's overlooked. So, and McEwen Mining hasn't moved as smoothly as I wanted it to, but the property we bought in Timmins had a lot of attributes similar to when I bought in Red Lake. It was high cost, short life, not the greatest labor relations, but in a district that has generated a huge amount of gold. So, and it had some high grade nuggets all over that they were like candy to my eyes. I just sort of get attracted to those. Well, there's got to be more there. But we've had floods, fires, and disappointing, not delivering on guidance. That's turning around now, and then we have a giant copper deposit that is, I think, going to turbocharge the value of McEwen Mining, because it's a large shareholder in it. But so what makes something happen? I think looking at it differently, coming with a different technology or approach, being in front of a lot of people. You can't just sit there and say, well, they're going to come to me. You've got to go to them. And the spaces are really crowded. So what is going to differentiate you in the market? And maybe you have to do a Colonel Saunders and go talk to 10,000 people before anyone buys your chicken. But it's being out there.